Hi, I'm Josh Stevens. I'm a visualizer with NASA's Earth Observatory, and I'm going to be talking about putting science communication on the map and talking a little bit about something called the Earth Observatory Explorer. But before I dive into that, I'd like to just cover briefly what the Earth Observatory is and how long it's been around. And it's basically a data-driven, image-based magazine from NASA that has been putting out imagery and stories since 1999. And in those 2 decades, more than 15,000 images and stories have been published. I've put the official mission statement here. I won't read that verbatim, but basically just know that the Earth Observatory has been trying to tell stories from the vantage point of NASA, whether it's from the satellites, the research that's coming from scientists, or just beautiful shots around Earth for over 2 decades now, and lots of images and stories as a result. A typical story from the Earth Observatory will look a bit like this, where the image leads. That's sort of the point of this. We call it the image of the day. And beneath each story, there's an article explaining what the image is, how it relates to the broader scheme of the science behind it, what it means for Earth systems, the research that's going on. So it's not just an image and a very short caption. There's a lot of very in-depth and deep reporting that goes into each one of these, and a lot of information that we're sharing with our readership. But if you start to peel back some of these layers, there's other information that we're providing here too. In addition to the title, each image has a date, it has a location, one or more sensors that were involved in acquiring the data used for the image, some various tags of how we classify the image and what the story relates to. And if it's a natural hazard story, that will also be its own category, and there will be other images related to that category within the same bin. And all this metadata is something that we wanted to take advantage of and make this actionable so that users could search based on this information and then see our imagery in new kind of ways, find new stories in ways that previously weren't allowed, and basically discover more content in this wealth of data that we've been publishing. So what the EO Explorer is essentially a map of all the stories that we've been publishing. Now, not every story that we have published has a location attached, and some of those stories that we do publish are global in scope, so it wouldn't make sense to put those on a map. But of those that do have geotagged coordinates, there are currently more than 11,000 of those, and each is shown on the map here. And these are using the leaflet marker cluster to show the number of images at each location using a color brewer blue scheme. And basically, it shows you how many images are within each area. And then there are some individual points where those individual stories are located. So a user could then zoom in on an area of interest and then click on one of these points to reveal a cluster and dive down deeper. Or if there are already points individually revealed at that scale level, you can click one, see a preview of the story and the image that's related to that, and find out more about that. And intuitively, clicking on the tooltip that pops up with the preview and everything will take you directly to that story, where you could then read more about that particular image and the article that goes with it. Now, this isn't just a one-way exploration that we wanted to build into this. As I'd mentioned earlier, that each story has its own location, and that's shown on the map. But this also works in reverse. Once a reader is reading one of these stories, they can then view the same area in EO Explorer, and this will bring them back to the map and the same location that this story was located. And this works whether you found that story in EO Explorer from a social media link or something directly on the site. You can always view other images nearby if the first image came with its own geotagged coordinates. And the way this works is actually rather simple. We have a MySQL database of image records, and one of the tables has all the information that we need, including the title, the coordinates, whether or not it's a natural hazard, and the name of the bin that the natural hazard would fall into, and of course the URL for both the story, the images, and things like that. And we basically just parse these out into two GeoJSON files, depending on if it's an image of the day record that goes out every single day, or if it's a natural hazard. One or more of those might be published each day. Some days we don't have anything to share in that category. And basically both of those files then power this leaflet map where we can toggle on the clusters and basically show everything all at once, or allow the user to toggle whether if they want to just see the image of the day or the natural hazard. And each time that the user toggles one of those selections, it recomputes the clustering and shows things specific to that category of choice. Now, the data that we used for this map, we essentially wanted to be a very NASA heavy data behind this, obviously. So it's using MODIS land cover to give a sense of the terrain, the land type, land cover type, and where you might want to browse for images if someone was looking for imagery near a delta versus a desert, for instance. This sort of information will help them do that. There's also Gebco bathymetry, which it might not seem that relevant for images acquired by satellite, but there are certainly a lot of cases where we have like undersea eruptions and things like that, or shallow reefs, and you can easily find a lot of imagery pertaining to those sort of features using this map because of that data. And there's also borders from Natural Earth and labels that we've used from Stamen. Their terrain data set has a separate labels layer, which is just fantastic and worked perfectly for the map that we had in mind. And there are asterisks next to both of those because we provide a couple different versions of this base map, and certain versions of those two layers are either available or not, depending on the user's needs. So I just want to mention some of the design considerations that we put into this. I've touched on a couple of those involving like the land cover and things like that, just giving a subtle sense of the landscape while still allowing the symbology to really be salient and take the most of the attention. The overall look and feel does incorporate the visual language of our site. So like the color brewer blue scheme really reflects a lot of the blues that are already in the site, as well as the oranges that we use to highlight natural hazards. But it's also generic enough that it could be pulled away from our site and used in other applications and other sites and not clash with their look and feel. So it's trying to balance that harmony between being usable elsewhere while also feeling right at home on our own site. Because it is based on satellite data that has a very specific resolution that it's acquired at, we also implemented a scale-dependent labeling and zoom constrained by latitude. So what that means is basically as users go around through the map, whether or not labels turn on or off is dependent on the zoom level. And that is true also of the latitude. So if you're browsing a story and it's at the very high latitudes in the Arctic, and you click on view map and view this area in the Explorer, it's going to be less zoomed in because of the stretching that happens with Web Mercator than if you were looking at something in Florida and you clicked on that map link. It's going to take you in at a more detailed view. The other thing that's happening is that clusters emphasize the amounts while also keeping individual points at the fore. And what I mean by that is the number and the color of the clusters is designed to bring attention to those where a lot of points are clustered within one point. But at the same time, it's really the individual stories that are going to drive interaction and clicks and be what the user is interested in. So there's equal visual weight given to both individual points and the maximum number of points within a cluster. The other thing that's important to mention is that these clusters reflect an inherent imprecision in image locations. So when we make a record and we put these images in, the point that we're placing the location at could be quite vague depending on the area of the image. For example, if an image of Italy is going to have a point roughly around the centroid. So showing that in a cluster rather than that individual point right in the center of Italy makes it clear that the image itself is beyond just Italy, it's not going to be necessarily an image of that precise area shown on the map. The other thing about that is that we often have multiple images within a story, and each one may have its own location nearby. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to show a very precise location, because that is neither intended nor really helpful with the final map once it was shown that way. As an example of what I mean, this is what the map would look like with the clustering turned off. And at first it looks maybe really neat, like you could zoom in and see all these places very precisely where you'd want to, but that's not the case. These are very generalized locations. So the areas that are shown on the map aren't necessarily the area that the images will show once you go to them. So the clustering really helps us pair the inherent imprecision of these points with their intended use, and that worked really well for us. It was very easy to implement. It was very fast, especially with the two GeoJSON files and toggling between them with more than 11,000 points to cluster. Both Leaflet and the market cluster plugin handled this beautifully and incredibly efficiently. And we're very happy to have put that together using this library, and look forward to a lot more things that we can do with it. That's essentially the end of the overview of EO Explorer, but I hope it's not the end of your experience with it. If you go to the first link, you can browse around, try it out. And then also at the second link, we provide the base map for this that you could use in your own maps and your own applications. This is available as both a GeoTIFF if you just want to use a flat file, but we've also put the map tiles together that you can easily download and then begin using in Leaflet or other mapping tiling libraries right away. So thank you for watching this, and if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at the email below, and I'll be happy to address those and speak with you. Thank you.